when you think about the economic and the political impacts of coronavirus, what comes to mind first for you where you are right now?
Well, there's a couple of things. So to start with, one of the big challenges right now, the U.S. is talking about this, Spain's talking about it. Italy's a little bit further ahead on the curve, right, having been hit harder earlier. The problem we're facing, it's akin to having a bunch of people. You've got like Italy's population, about 60 million people. Well, you got 60 million people sitting on a plane on the tarmac going, when the hell do we get off? And you know how it drives you nuts when they don't tell you, when no one says anything about when you're going to get off the damn plane? That's what we're having right now. We're really struggling with getting some decent communication on what the plan is. You know, how are we going to start to open up the economy? What's the timeline? They've started getting a little bit better about it because without that, you know, how do businesses plan? If you know you're going to be locked down for a month versus 4 months, a couple of weeks, you know, you're going to handle the situation differently. So one of the things that really needs to happen everywhere is governments need to do a better job of communicating, and that will help the economy as well because people can kind of have in their head, all right, here's what I need to do to get through this. We've had a couple of difficult things as well here with some of them are a little bit funny. So yesterday, April 1st, and it's sort of fun that it was on April Fool's Day. On April Fool's Day was the first day in Italy that you could apply to get a 600 euro a month aid for those people who, you know, they're out of work, they need to make ends meet. About 4 million people went to the website to try and do this, and the website kept crashing. And on top of crashing, it was also occasionally popping up other people's personal information.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's kind of par for the course for the Italian government. Now, can't really knock that because the U.S. had some similar issues with the launch of Obamacare, but that's some of the frustrations. But a little bit of a humorous note was somebody tweeted out about how it's why they prefer the private sector to the public sector. It's like 4 million hits to the Italian help website and it crashes. 400 million people going to Pornhub, no problem. Pornhub, of course, then tweeted to the Italians that they would be willing to help the government with their servers. So
right.
We got that going for us, right? So far, we haven't had some really great data on what the actual unemployment hit has been. Italy doesn't do the weekly the way the U.S. does. And right in the U.S., we've seen just absolutely astronomical record increases in the first initial filings for unemployment. Italy, we will get that in a couple days because they just do by month. And February's data starting out, I mean, it wasn't that great. It was great in Italy terms, but it wasn't great compared to where you'd like it to be because unemployment was already at like 9.7%. So it's not like we're starting off at a really good point.
Right. Yeah. What do you make of those numbers? Because we were talking about this just before we came on. That you had a 3.2 that became a 3.3, and then you had a 6.6. By the way, these are seasonally adjusted, and obviously seasonal adjustments don't really matter because the magnitude is so large that it swamps any seasonal adjustments. The real number was 5.8. Still, nonetheless, that's an enormous number. In the market, it's futures sold off a little bit in the U.S. In the wake of this, but generally speaking, the market tone is relatively positive. How do you reconcile that?
I think a good part of that is what's going on with Trump tweeting about the oil market. And I think the market's in for a big disappointment because looking at his numbers, he's implying that Russia and Saudi Arabia are going to cut their production roughly in half and the U.S. isn't going to do anything. I don't really see Russia and Saudi Arabia basically agreeing to kind of subsidize the American shale oil sector. So I don't think we're going to get the numbers that he's talking about. I can't imagine that Saudi Arabia and Russia are not at some point going to go, all right, we both need to blink. This hurts. This is hurting all of us. I mean, we're hitting the point with oil where there's literally no place to put it. And it's not like these are things that you can just go turn on and go, I'm going to turn it off for a couple of hours, right? I mean, this is big commitment to increasing capacity or decreasing capacity. And so I think the market got all excited about that. Plus, there's think the market still has this belief that if it's really, really bad, the government can come in and do something.
Right.
And that to me is the most terrifying belief. You have that belief in Italy as well, although it's not really directed exactly at the Italian government, that the Italian government is going to save the day. It's more that the European Union will come and save the day. And the degree to which that is possible is decidedly suspect, to say the least. So let's kind of take a look at where Italy's situation at the moment. And just to kind of give Italy a little bit of credit, it's not like Italy's economy is about 1/10 the size of the US. So it's GDP about 1/10 of the US, where it has about 1/5 of the population, right? So that's pretty weak. That doesn't sound so good. On the plus side, Italy's actually, their labor participation rate is higher than the US. It's 65.5%, where the US is 63.4%. So there's actually more people in Italy looking to work. The unemployment rate here is much higher at 9.7%. But the real problem here is the amount that the government is already involved in the economy. Government spending actually accounts for 48.4% of the economy. So that's like half of the economy comes from the government spending. And one of the dirty little secrets about that is that government spending gets counted whether the company, so the government hires the company to do something, right? To build a bridge. We've had a problem. We've had some problems with bridges lately. They don't actually give the cash to the company. They give an IOU.
Right.
But the spending gets counted even though the company hasn't received it. So there's actually a huge market in Italy for companies to go to the banks and say, okay, I have this payable from the government. They've owed me for like a year. Can the bank please lend me the money? Okay, well then the government's like, yes, you should lend the money. Okay, so the banks lend the money, but you get into this spiral, right? That's a really bad situation to be in. And we're already dealing with a country that almost half of the economy is government spending, and they're not even paying.
Right.
Tough to run a business, right? Pay your employees, have your employees be able to buy stuff and have the economy going when they're not getting paid. Now, what the hell are you going to do?
They're being paid in fiat money, if you think about it, because isn't that what fiat money is? It's just an IOU. I mean, this is
even worse. This is like a fiat on a fiat.
As you were speaking, I was thinking to myself, that redenomination risk. That's the word that came into, or the phrase that came into my head. Yeah. And I was thinking to myself, how long has this been going on with these IOUs? Because at the end of the day, that's how you redenominate, is you redenominate via a IOU that allows you to therefore say, these are now lira, these are real money. This is we're going to move from the euro to these IOUs.
And that is definitely the threat, right? Because Italy can look at the Eurozone. It was one thing, the Eurozone's already been rocked by Brexit. That was pretty ugly. The UK had been part of the European Union, not the Eurozone with the unified currency, but part of the European Union for decades. So this was a massive, massive rejection. And to have Italy then fall out, it's a pretty good threat, right?
Oh, yeah.
Europe's is really not gonna want that. But let's look at how good the Eurozone's actually been for Italy. Now, not saying that it's the Eurozone doing this, but while Italy's been in the Eurozone, things haven't gone that well. We've all heard about how Greece, right? We had the Grexit because Greece was a complete disaster. Well, since the start of the Eurozone, Greece's per capita GDP in constant currency has gone up 3.1%. That's pretty bad. Like 20 years and your GDP per capita has gone up 3. I mean, that's like over 20 years, your pay increased 3%, not per year, but totally. So that's kind of ugly. Well, 3.1 looks pretty damn good when you're looking at Italy, which has seen its per capita GDP drop by 2.1%. I mean, and no other country in the Eurozone, no other major country has seen anything like that. For comparison, over that same time period, you've got the US per capita GDP, up 24.6%. Ireland knocked it out of the ballpark. They're up nearly 80%, right?
Right.
So, and Germany, who's the one that kind of does a lot of the finger wagging, they kind of hold the purse strings, they're up 24.6%, kind of around the same as the US. And yet Italy has gone down. Now, part of that is argued to be because the Eurozone, with the stronger northern economies, you create a currency that is stronger than it would be if it was just the southern guys, right, that are less productive. So Italy's exchange rate is higher than it should be. So it exports less, and its imports are difficult, right? Like it's tough on the economy when your currency is valued too high, right? That's what you do when you want to get your economy going, devalue your currency against everyone else, and suddenly your stuff's cheap. Well, Italy's been facing that headwind, but there's more to it than that. That's a pretty easy answer. And right now the push is for the floating of euro bonds. Okay, so you float these euro bonds and then you give more money to the Italian government to spend. So what, the Italian government's going to account for like 60, 70% of GDP, because we're already almost at 50%. I mean, that how is that going to work out? And how can the private sector, because it's the private sector that has to generate the wealth to pay those bonds, right? It's not the public sector. Public sector creates no wealth. It just takes wealth from other places and spends it. You have to have the private sector. Well, the private sector is down to like 30, 40%. How the hell is this going to possibly work? So there's people thinking, oh, well, we can just, we'll borrow money, we'll euro bonds, it'll be fine, and we'll just keep doing the same old, same old. It isn't going to work.